For the son of this bondwoman should not be heir with my son, even with Isaac. Verse 11. And the thing was very grievous in Abram's sight because of his son. Skip down to verse 14. And Abraham rose up early in the morning, and took bread and a bottle of water, and gave it unto Hagar, putting it on her shoulder and the child, and sent her away. And she departed and wandered in the wilderness of Beersheba. When I read these few verses here, and we think about Hagar and Ishmael, specifically Ishmael, the son of Abraham, it seems that he's forced to be a prodigal. Forced to be a prodigal. You know, in the prodigal son story, the parable, he wants to leave. But here in this story, do you see anything in there about Ishmael wanting to go somewhere else? Sounds like he's forced to be a prodigal. What a conflict. Why would anyone be forced to be a prodigal? Genesis 21 here, verses 9 and 10. Verses 9 and 10. Sarah saw the son of Hagar the Egyptian, which she had borne unto Abraham, mocking. Therefore she said to Abram, Cast out this bondwoman and her son, for the son of this bondwoman shall not be heir with my son, even with Isaac. It's interesting as you read through this chapter here, reading through the story part of this chapter, the story doesn't use the name Ishmael. Never uses the name Ishmael. Instead, always consistently called son of Hagar. Son of Hagar. His name is elsewhere, but in the story time, it's always identified as son of Hagar. So we'd better look at her a little bit then. Genesis chapter 16. We need to explore here, since we have this conflict about forced to be a prodigal, we better explore and find out what's going on. Why is that so? Genesis chapter 16, verses 3 and 4. Why is, in the story, why is he always called son of Hagar? Genesis 16, verses 3 and 4. Sarai, Abram's wife, took Hagar, her maid, the Egyptian, after Abram had dwelt 10 years in the land of Canaan, and gave her to her husband Abram to be his wife. And he went in unto Hagar, and she conceived. And when she saw that she had conceived, her mistress was despised in her eyes. Despised in her eyes. When Hagar gets pregnant, she feels that she is better than Sarah. Despised. That's a strong word. Despised, that's a lot more than just not humble, right? Because we can say, oh, they're not very humble. In this case, it's despised. That's stronger, right? That's related to critical or rude, right? It's more than just not humble anymore. She is critical or rude. Genesis 21, verse 9. Back to this key verse here for today, Genesis 21, verse 9. Sarah saw the son of Hagar, the Egyptian, which she had borne unto Abram, mocking. Mocking. Ishmael has the same attitude, right? Same attitude. Hagar despised Sarah. Ishmael despises Isaac. He's mocking him here. Think about it. What kind of person is mean to or makes fun of a little 3-year-old kid? Right? Think about that. Got a little 3, 4, 5-year-old kid. Somewhere in that age range, approximately is about the time when Isaac would be weaned. 3, 4, 5 years old, somewhere in there. Who makes fun of a little kid at that age, right? Let's hope nobody does that, right? But he does, all right? He's making fun of this little kid. That's more than just not humble. That really is critical or rude, all right? Ishmael has been an only child for about 17 years. Right? For about 17 years, he's been an only child. Now, talking about the birth order for a moment, an only child is usually very confident because they've been raised by themselves in many ways. They're confident about many things that they can do. The idea of confidence is good. I pray that Jean has appropriate self-confidence. That's a nightly prayer that I have. Because we want confidence, but appropriately so, right? Because overly confident is not humble, right? And that's a problem there, right? So we don't want that, all right? Overly confident would not be humble. Also for the only child, there's a general trend, again, for psychology here. General trend for the only child is they desire excellence. I'm not talking about all negative things. There's good and bad for every child, regardless of birth order. But only child oftentimes desires excellence. Now, if there's too much of that, then we're getting into perfectionism, right?
Yeah.
Oh, that one is a perfectionist. They like things just so. And I've seen that before with some only children. That's not true for all, but because it's only them, they get to arrange things in their room just the way they want. And guess what? There's no little brother or sister messing it up, right? So they have an idea about the way they want things. Desire excellence, that could be good, but too much would be a desire for perfectionism. And then what happens then, if that's the desire to have things perfect, anything less than perfect is unacceptable. Anything less than perfect is unacceptable. So with that idea in mind, anything less than perfect is unacceptable. That kind of makes it difficult to please, right? Mm-hmm. It makes it a little bit more likely that he is critical and rude and has some problems here. Genesis chapter 17. Genesis chapter 17. Here's a verse that I think is very important for us to know and understand about Ishmael. Genesis 17, verse 20. This is God speaking here to Abraham. Genesis 17, verse 20. As for Ishmael, I have heard thee. Behold, I have blessed him, and will make him fruitful, and will multiply him exceedingly. 12 princes shall he beget, and I will make him a great nation. Isn't that a pretty good blessing?
Yeah.
He's going to have 12 princes. He'll become a great nation. God says that he's blessed. Any questions about that? He's blessed. He's going to have 12 nations. Going to become a great nation himself. He's blessed. But, verse 21, but my covenant will I establish with Isaac, which Sarah shall bear unto thee at the set time in the next year. Ishmael is blessed, but he's not chosen. Right? He's blessed, but not chosen. When Sonny was in kindergarten, they had a pageant, not just a beauty pageant, but it was a pageant where they're looking for a pretty kindergartner and one that was kind and one that was smart. So that's their little pageant for kindergarten. And they had 3 levels. It's in Korea, so they had Jin, So, and Me. Jin would be the top one there, So, Me. Jin, So, Me. Those would be those top 3 that they were looking for. And so they had a little pageant there in kindergarten. I don't know what all they did. But then the fathers met together and they had to figure out the order and who was the winner, that kind of thing. So they all agreed and they all knew Sonny was Jin. Isn't that nice? Yeah. All right, Sonny was Jin. So they agreed about that. And while the fathers were meeting together, they were voting, they were talking and trying to figure out things, then the principal came in and interrupted them. They were figuring things out and who was Jin, who was So, and who was Me. Sonny was Jin. And they were figuring out the other things, and the principal interrupted them. And then there was some confusion. Things got a little bit strange after that, and Sonny and her father still haven't quite figured out exactly everything that happened. But Sonny was Jin, and yet there was another girl who was Queen. Jin, So, Me. This isn't the only kindergarten that has done this. This is the way the pageant works. Jin, So, Me. And yet, here's the principal saying, we also have a queen. We have a queen. That's kind of a strange level. Queen's not even a Korean word, right?
Right.
And so, strange level, what is this? It turns out that a mother had paid approximately $150. So, another added level, right? Add another level. Something was different there. So, there was a prize. Not the same as Jin, but something else. That's kind of strange. There can only be one ancestor in the bloodline of Christ. Right? There's no way that we can change that around. There can only be one ancestor in the bloodline of Christ. Isaac is the chosen one for the bloodline. It doesn't mean that Ishmael is bad. It doesn't mean that he has to be bad either, right? Just because Isaac is the chosen line doesn't mean that Ishmael's bad or that he's has to be bad. He's just not chosen, that's all. Maybe you think Ishmael is bad, And so that's why he's not chosen. You can be perfect and still not chosen for the highest position. Did you realize that?
Yeah.
You can be perfect and still not chosen for the highest position. Here's an example. Lucifer. Lucifer was set in a very high position. Ezekiel chapter 28. Ezekiel chapter 28. This was before sin, meaning that everything there was perfect, so nothing wrong there. Ezekiel chapter 28, set in a high position. Ezekiel 28 verses 14 and 15 here describe Lucifer's set position, which is very blessed. All right, very good spot there. Ezekiel 28 verse 14. Thou art the anointed cherub that covers. To be anointed would be the equivalent of being blessed. Thou art the anointed cherub that covers, and I have set thee so. Thou wast upon the holy mountain of God. Thou hast walked up and down in the midst of the stones of fire. Thou wast perfect in thy ways from the day that thou wast created till iniquity was found in thee. So Lucifer, absolutely perfect, set in a high position, blessed, but not chosen for the highest position. Right? Not chosen for the highest position. That belonged to God. That was God's prerogative. That was going to be his spot. All right? Isaiah 14. Isaiah 14 verses 12 through 14. Isaiah 14 verses 12 through 14. How art thou fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning? How art thou cut down to the ground, which did weaken the nations? For thou hast said in thine heart, I will ascend into heaven. I will exalt my throne above the stars of God. I will sit also upon the mount of the congregation in the sides of the north. I will ascend above the heights of the cloud. I will be like the Most High. Perfect, set in a very high spot, and yet wants a little something higher, right? Like even better, right? Going for even something higher. His attitude began his downfall, right?
Yeah.
Lucifer's attitude begins his downfall. Attitude. Hagar and Ishmael's attitude began their downfall. The attitude of the prodigal also begins his downfall. Not humble. Luke chapter 15 verse 12. Luke 15 verse 12. One key word today here. Luke 15 verse 12. Not humble. He demands his inheritance. This prodigal goes to his father. Verse 12. The younger of them said to his father, Father, give me the portion of goods that falls to me. And he divided unto them his living. He demands his inheritance and says, give me that. I want that. He's demanding it. He's taking it. That's not humble. He's critical of the rules. Right? He's got this critical attitude about him. He's critical of the rules. Here's how I know that. Because in his new house, he has no rules. Verse 13. Not many days after, the younger son gathered all together, took his journey into a far country, and there wasted his substance with riotous living. This word here, riotous living. He has no rules in his new home. Why does he have no rules in his new home? Because he didn't like the ones in the other house. He was critical about those. That's bad living there. Rude. And he's certainly rude to his living father. Right? Yeah. And rude to his family. Why don't you give me your inheritance? We'll pretend you're dead. Why don't you hand that over? Right? Very rude and critical. Doesn't like family, doesn't like the rules. These attitudes develop into actions. Isn't that how that works? Attitudes develop into actions, and that's when the prodigal leaves. In Cheongnyang, which is a location just outside of Seoul, now it would be in Seoul, but it used to be kind of the outskirts of Seoul. There was a pastor there who was studying with a man. This man was a very high-level government official. He was a powerful man politically in many ways, but he was also a rich man. Powerful, rich man, and he was about ready to join the Seventh-day Adventist Church. He was about ready to join the Seventh-day Adventist Church, and so he was going to join the Seventh-day Adventist Church and bring his whole family with him. The whole family was going to join the church together. And so he had also talked about his plan. He had quite a bit of money, and he was going to be giving quite a bit of money for the church. He was excited about the church, excited about truth, and his heart, as he was excited about that, wanted to return something to the church, give something to God, and also get to know his new church family. And so he hosted a Vespers for his family and for the church family, the church that he would be joining. So he had invited them over, his family as well, so they could all be together. And they had a Vespers together, and an elder, one of the elders from the church, complained, "This food is too salty." I think there's a way that you can say that politely, but I don't think he said it that way, if he needed to say it at all. He said the food was too salty. And the man thought, I'm better than these people. I'm better than these rude people. And so he decided not to join the church.
Uh-oh.
I think part of that is his attitude as well. They may have been rude, but it may have been his attitude that stopped him there. I remember when I was a teenager, there was a pastor from another church, a different denomination. His name was Bernie. He joined the Seventh Adventist Church in Maine. And since I return to Maine every summer, keep in touch with some of the news there. And so this pastor joined the church there in Maine, and many were very excited. It's not very often that pastor from another church joins the Seventh Adventist Church, and so many people were very excited, and he was very excited as well. He had just discovered and understood the Sabbath truth in the Bible. He understood that Jesus was coming again soon, and these things had never been clear to him before. And so with the excitement, he understood the truth of the Bible. And so the New England Conference there, they wanted to send him to Andrews University. They said, why don't you go to the seminary for a little bit? There's some classes there, and he's gone through some Bible studies, but in the seminary he understands some more things, and there's more things to the Seventh Adventist Church than just Sabbath and Jesus coming again soon. There's lots of fascinating things in the Bible that we think that he should have learned, or he would like to learn if he could go to the seminary. And so they wanted to make arrangements for him to go there. I remember seeing a video where he was preaching and he said, I don't need the seminary. And he was very excited and very adamant. And he said, it's time to preach that Jesus is coming again soon. And everybody in the audience said amen, agreed that it is time to preach that Jesus is coming again soon. But something about his attitude, even though things sounded good, something about his attitude was not humble. And he did not follow the instructions to go to the seminary. And then a short time later, he was no longer a Seventh-day Adventist. Something about his attitude led him away. A church here in Michigan, they were growing. Lots of new members. And the church had gone from a small group to having so many, lots of new members, and new people coming in, and some of them were very talented, very capable leaders. So some of them could be good leaders, and in a while, at the appropriate time, the nominating committee met. They elected some new elders, and they replaced 3 of the long-serving elders. That church had had 3 elders, the same ones, for many, many years, and now there was 3 more, and some jobs changed, and different adjustments there were made. Even a new head elder was selected. 3 of them had worked as a team for a long time. And then the change came, and they were upset. And so those 3 elders went to other churches. Right? Still Seventh-day Adventists, but they went to other churches. They were critical of the new leaders and critical of the nominating committee, so they went to some other local church. Something about the attitude, they just couldn't stay in that church family anymore. I remember Michael a few years ago, he had a lot of health problems. And Michael talked about the fact that he'd like to say that he had died 3 times in the hospital and brought back to life. I'm not sure exactly what he was defining as being dead, because he was still there and talking to me, but he said that he was back to life and he was alive, and he felt, I'm not sure where he got this feeling from, but he felt that he had a special mission because he was still alive. And he said that his special mission was to find the hypocrites in the church.
Oh, boy. Oh, no.
That was his special mission, to find the hypocrites in the church. And he joined my church.
Oh, no.
And the evangelist at that time, who was leading our series, Dan Tower said, look, every church has hypocrites. So you feel that you have a special mission to find some hypocrites? I'll tell you right now, you'll find some here, because every church has hypocrites. That made it very difficult for Michael to stay in that church. I think he did, but I think his attitude had to change over time. It made it very difficult for him to come and join, but difficult to stay as well. You know, for some people, if they're not treated as special, they get upset. Right? You've seen that before. Some people, if they're not treated as special, they get angry. They're disappointed. They're upset. And they're ready to leave. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Why is that prodigal leave? Why is Ishmael gone? Something about the attitude makes them ready to leave. Attitudes can take a person far away. Like in that story from Seoul, Korea, there, that area. Far away. No longer part of the Seventh Adventist Church, didn't want to be part of them. Or it can take them some distance away. I'm not sure exactly what happened to Pastor Bernie. Or maybe just a little distance away. Like those elders, they didn't go that far away, just went to a different church. Or it can make it very hard to stay with a bad attitude, like for Michael. For Ishmael, he's sent a little ways away. Genesis chapter 25. Genesis chapter 25. Ishmael is sent a little ways away. Not far, he's just sent away. Here's some details here. Genesis 25, verse 9. When Abraham dies, says verse 9, his sons Isaac and Ishmael buried him in the cave of Machpelah, in the field of Ephron, the son of Zohar, the Hittite, which is before Mamre. He couldn't have been that far away if he came back for the funeral, right?
Right.
These days you can get an airplane and come back from quite a distance away. It's a phone call. He was close enough that he knew. All right? Verses 17 and 18. These are the years of the life of Ishmael, 137 years. He gave up the ghost and died and was gathered to his people. And they, Ishmael and his sons, that family, they dwelt from Havilah unto Shur, that is before Egypt, as thou goest toward Assyria, and he died in the presence of all his brethren. So it tells us where he's living, and it's really not that far away. He's not too far away for a funeral. He's really actually not that far away from Isaac. Chapter 25, still verse 11. It came to pass after the death of Abraham that God blessed his son Isaac, and Isaac dwelt by the well, Lahoroi. Which, if you want to go back to chapter 16, verse 14, tells us where that is. It's really not that far away from where Ishmael was. It says Lahoroi is between Kadesh and Berea there. Not far away at all. So he went a little ways away. Not too far away for the funeral. Not really that far away from Isaac. But Ishmael and his family, they are a little ways away, but they were in a slow drift away. We don't have very many after this time where we read about Ishmael's family in a saved relationship with God, right?
Right.
And so many of us, we assume that Ishmael must have been bad. That's why Isaac was chosen. No, Ishmael was just in a slow drift away. Why? You know, sometimes when the prodigal leaves, they are not running. Sometimes they're just in a slow drift away. What about your attitude? What about your attitude? Are you in a slow drift away? Just maybe something about your attitude that's slowly carrying you away from God? Or are you going to stay close to God, regardless of your place in His plan? Think about your attitude. Ask the Holy Spirit to guide you and direct you. Is your attitude need any adjustments, any changes? We want to make sure that we're drawing closer to God every day.
Amen.
And that we'll draw closer to Him instead of being slowly drifting away. Our closing hymn is number 319. Hymn 319.